the Eagles are the better team, and the Eagles are going to win the Super Bowl.
Welcome to a special edition of The Edge with Hall of Fame quarterback Kurt Warner. How are you doing, Kurt?
I'm doing really, really well. How you guys doing?
Doing great.
A lot of
Doing
green
it.
on my screen, though. That's for sure. A lot of green.
You know, Kurt, before we get into the hard-hitting football questions, I want to address an anecdote you told during your Hall of Fame speech, working the graveyard shift at Hy-Vee grocery store. So there was a Dan Marino's Wheaties box that was staring you down like the Mona Lisa, seemingly asking you, are you going to spend the rest of your life stocking someone else's cereal box, or are you going to step up and make sure someone else is stocking yours? But what you didn't mention in your speech is you did achieve that dream. And I connected with a member of your congregation in Chesterfield who had an unopened box of this,
wow. All right.
Kurt Warner's Crunch Time. So
Okay.
this one says best if used by December 2000, so it's probably a biohazard by now.
I'm sure they actually made that cereal into candy bars and everything. So as the story goes, like you said, what I didn't get to achieve was I never got on a Wheaties box, and so that was one of my dreams growing up. Is obviously all the big time athletes, you win a gold medal or whatever, they're on the Wheaties box. So that was one of my dreams, and so I always wanted to do that. And ironically, you're right. I got that cereal that came out in the middle of '99, and then we win the Super Bowl, and Wheaties wants to put our team on the Wheaties box, and I can't be on the Wheaties box because I had already signed a deal for a different cereal. And so one of my dreams as a kid, one of those bucket list things, I was not able to accomplish that like Dan Marino and the rest of my teammates.
That's crazy.
Amazing.
I know, it's unbelievable.
Sam actually does some legal work, so maybe he could have got you contractually out of that.
I should have built it in. I wasn't thinking that big at the time that it was like, wow, someone wants to put me on a cereal box. Okay. And never thought, oh my gosh, we're going to win the Super Bowl and I'm going to be on a Wheaties box. So anyway, short-sighted thinking, I guess.
Getting into the football questions, you've often said a completion could still be a bad decision. Quarterbacks can get fooled by positive results from a flawed process. So in today's kind of analytics driven NFL, how do you reconcile your process oriented philosophy with a league that increasingly quantifies and rewards results, even if they may be like fool's gold? Does our reliance on new stats risk coaching the Y out of the next generation of quarterbacks?
For me, if I was coaching a quarterback, so, obviously I'm doing a lot of film study, and on film study, to me, I can quantify whether I think something was a good decision, whether I think it was a good throw, or whether somebody just got lucky. I mean, there's times, and we've all had it as quarterbacks, where there's times where, we're going back and we're throwing the ball, and sometimes we're throwing it to a different guy. And just, it so happens you throw the ball a little bit high, and you throw it high, it goes over the defender, and there's another guy back behind it, and you get a touchdown on it. And it's easy to kind of run off like, oh man, wasn't that a great play? But in your mind, okay, that was a terrible throw, and I got lucky, and it turned out to be a touchdown. But so much of it is holding yourself accountable to a particular standard. In this day and age, you can lead guys into trouble as a quarterback, and you get away with it because it's a 15-yard penalty now, where a decade ago, your receivers are coming back saying, I'm never going across the middle again if you're going to lead me into trouble. And so there's just so many different aspects to playing the game and playing the position and understanding what accuracy looks like. We were talking a few years ago. So back when I was playing, I led the league in completion percentage, a number of times. And so let's just say it was 67% at the time, would lead the league and lead the league by a good margin. And we were looking just a couple years ago, and there was sometime halfway through the season where there were 20 quarterbacks in the NFL that had a completion percentage higher than 67. And you're just like, the game has changed. Throwing bubble screens is not great quarterback play. And so I think you have to be able to watch the tape and understand what you're seeing to truly evaluate quarterbacks, what they're good at, what they struggle at, how well they are playing. And it can't just be on quarterback rating and completion percentage and touchdown to interception ratio. There are so many different things that go into, that aspect that's how the way I always break it down, like when I'm doing my shows and doing my stuff, is I always watch the tape and then I'll send my researcher questions based off of what I see on tape. So this is what seems to be the theme for me. Can you tell me if the stats back this up? And if they do, now I can use the stats to explain what I'm seeing and who this quarterback is. If they don't, then to me, it's like, okay, the stats aren't backing up what I'm seeing on tape, and so I'm not going to use them. So many people, I think, do the opposite. They take the stats and go, this guy's playing great because look at what this says. And, that's kind of the first indication for me that a person doesn't really know what they're talking about. Like that's how a lot of people gain credibility with me, is I'll listen to them talk about a player or a game or what happened. And then when I go watch the game, or if I've already watched the game, I'll go, okay, that person's right on. Or that person has no idea what they're talking about. They are simply basing it off of what they heard or what the stats said, and they did not watch that game, because we've all had games as quarterbacks where we go in and I leave going, man, I didn't play very well. And my quarterback rating is really good because it just so happened that things just played out in my favor. Defender, 3 defenders dropped interceptions. I had a tip pass that was like that kind of stuff. And then you go play another game where you're like, man, I played really well. I don't know if I made a bad decision. Now, some of those good decisions might be throwing the ball away or throwing a check down, or you throw a perfect pass and it goes to the 1 yard line and then you hand it off and somebody else scores instead of getting the touchdown. So your quarterback rating is way lower, but you walk away going, man, I played a really good football game. And that to me is how, in this day and age with analytics and stats, we get, misconstrued on what we think is really good quarterback play. And unless you really know what you're looking at and then are watching the film, to me, it's hard for me to buy into all these analytics and all these stats. And I often sit back and go, okay, I also want to know who's in the room deciding that this is whatever stat, this is, completion percentage above expected. And it's like, what does that mean? And who's deciding how much above expected? That kind of stuff to me is kind of crazy talk. So to me, I want to watch the tape. I want to see what guys are doing, and I want to assess them that way. And then if I can find some stats to back that up, to give more credence to it, I'll go and do that.
So, internally, are you getting grades from your coaching staff?
To some degree. Yeah, normally I would say that most coaches will give you a grade sheet, at least in the kind of the beginning stages of things. Maybe when you become a veteran and, you're a good player, they don't have to assess and give you a plus or minus or whatever on every play. But in early stages, I think you see that a lot. At college level, you see that a lot, where it's like, okay, I'm going to grade you on, every play that you made in the game. Was it a good decision? Was it an accurate throw? Blah, blah, blah. Should you have gone somewhere else? Those kinds of things to give you a sense of, okay, what the coaches are looking for. And I think it's also a nice way to keep yourself accountable, right? Is that, and you don't always have to agree on it, because a coach isn't in your head, right? Nobody is in your head to know exactly why you made the decision that you made, and vice versa, right? Like if I got a plus for throwing a touchdown pass when I, threw it over a guy's head and it hit the wrong guy, yeah, I mean, I'll look at that and go, it's nice to get a plus, but that was a negative because that was a bad throw because I missed my guy and I just happened to get lucky on that particular play. And so holding yourself accountable is so important. And I think it is hard for a lot of guys to hold themselves personally accountable at the level that they need to. So it's nice to have coaches that are always grading you and breaking it down and giving you an assessment on what was good and what wasn't good. And then really it comes down to the internal part as always, right? Okay, what are you going to do with that information? the information that you have to know that this was a good play or a bad play, the information that your coaches are telling you to tell you it was a good or a bad play, and then how do you mesh all that together so you can continue to improve?
So do you think that this accountability is a coaching point or an area for quarterbacks that's underemphasized?
I mean, I think, you're always trying to keep people accountable. But, anybody in life knows that accountability is a personal thing, right? And again, you can have somebody that, holds you accountable in certain things, being on time and doing those sorts of things. But, I've always said it's oftentimes very easy to, play a game, know what happened, and then go and watch the film and explain away a bad decision or something that didn't really happen because of it. I'll give you an example that, I was doing an interview with a quarterback, a few years ago. And, so we had pulled out different plays on tape and what had happened. And, so I would watch it from, sideline, and then I'd watch it from behind and all of this stuff. And, it was one of those things where I know that the quarterback's eyes never went to the backside. Like, he never saw what was going on the backside. And so it was one of those where they kind of turned and threw, and they got lucky that it it worked out in their favor. And I remember sitting down in the interview with them and just kind of talking. They talked me through this and what happened. And, because they had watched the tape a million times and because they knew they got away with it, they explained to me what all they saw on the backside and why they threw it there. And I'm like, okay. And in my mind, I know he's just coaching me off of what he saw on tape. And he's explaining away a bad decision because he never even looked over there. His eyes never even went that direction. So there's no way he saw what he was telling me he saw. And so, and I think that's very easy for us, right? Nobody wants to be under the spotlight or in a team meeting and, always calling themselves out or saying they're, bad decision or whatever. But I think it's important to be able to hold yourself accountable to what your standard is and not try to explain it away or not try to fool people into thinking you're better than you are, because, that just becomes a habit of, always deflecting something and trying to come up with, with an answer when the answer was, no, that's on me, bad decision, right? Got away with it, but that was a bad decision. And you hold yourself accountable. And I think it forces other people to hold themselves accountable. If you're the first one to say, hey, that one's on me, that leads somebody else to go, hey, you know what, Kurt, now that one was on me, and now we start getting and building that accountability that says, okay, he's going to take ownership when he makes a mistake. I'll take ownership. And now as we're all trying to eliminate those things and being honest with each other and ourselves about what went wrong and how we can improve it, that's where we start to push ourselves to new levels.
Listening to a lot of your content, you'll talk about the quarterback's job is to be a decision maker first. And so I wanted to ask you, what do you think are some of the primary sources of bad decision making?
Wow. I think there's such a variety of different things. And so, some of it can be strictly just, a lot of guys don't know what they're seeing. And so they're dropping back and they're trying to find a body and they're just throwing it to them. Other times, it can be defenses do a great job of disguising or, holding their coverage to the last second or doing something that's a little bit different, that's unexpected. And it can lead to bad decisions. Timing is, to me, one of the biggest things. Guys aren't ready. They're not set and their feet aren't, ready and balanced and ready to throw. And so it leads to bad decisions and bad throws because they're late, or they're throwing the ball somewhere that they shouldn't be throwing the football in terms of, where you might be making a decent decision if you're on time, but when you're late, all of a sudden, boom, now it becomes a bad decision. So I think, and I think scheme leads to a lot of bad decisions that, schemes aren't set up to give quarterbacks always an answer. And so now they're trying to force answers because there's not a true answer to, oh, if this guy covers that, then this guy's going to be open. And so, making a decision has all these different variables that that make it hard. And then obviously, things like pressure, and not having a pressure answer. I don't know what to do. I'm not really expecting it. Okay, here comes the pressure. What am I got to solve it somehow. And you make bad decisions that way. Or having pressure around you, obviously, when time starts to shrink, the natural thing is to always try to speed things up or force the issue a little bit, which can also lead to bad decisions. So again, it's when I'm watching tape and we're trying to decipher interceptions, you have to take everything into consideration. We were talking a little bit about my son EJ, before we got on here, and quarterback, plays in college, and he's got a little bit of a rap that he throws interceptions. And so, he's had a number of interceptions in his career. And it's such a hard thing because most people are just looking at the stats. And, you go back and look, and, he had 5 or 6 tipped passes that were intercepted last year. Like a ridiculous amount of tipped passes that get intercepted. But everybody just looks at the numbers and I had 14 interceptions last year. Oh my gosh, he's got an interception problem, or they don't know that a receiver is supposed to go here. And he plays very much like I did, not just in the fact that I threw a lot of interceptions too, but when you play with anticipation, you're throwing the ball expecting a guy to be in a certain spot. And if a guy goes over a safety instead of under a safety, you hit the safety in the numbers and you look terrible. And, and so when I'm watching tape, that's the kind of stuff I'm watching, to get a sense. Somebody's quarterback, the touchdown interception ratio might be great, but they have a whole bunch of passes, that are interception worthy passes that just don't seem to get caught. And then there's another guy that's playing great, and it just seems like every time the ball gets tipped or, every time he misses a throw, it's intercepted instead of hitting the ground. And, and so it's easy to assess those things as opposed to, really starting to understand the decision-making process. And so I always say when I assess a quarterback, I don't assess them on, overall, stats of the game. I assess them play to play. And so I go back and look at that particular play and say, okay, here's the play. Here's what the defense did. Here's the play call. Now I assess that play. Oh, terrible play call. Quarterback had no chance. Even if he throw an interception, hey, it was, yes, bad decision. He threw an interception, but he had no chance on this play, and so I take a little bit, back from the quarterback, and so it's those kinds of things that I'm trying to look at each play individually and go, what happened on this play? And now we can assess that instead of trying to just throw a bunch of stuff, into the mix. A great example is I broke down a game for Justin Herbert. I think it was last year or 2 years ago, and he threw for 400 yards. And, and his completion percentage was really good, 70% or something. But they ended up losing the game. And, so I broke it down and obviously showed some great plays. He made some great throws. But the thing that stuck out to me was in the fourth quarter, he had 5 or 6 throws that Justin Herbert can make in his sleep, that he just should have made in that game. And he didn't make those plays. And those were game-winning plays. He made a whole bunch of plays in the first 3 quarters and threw for 400 yards, and the stats looked incredible, but they lost the game. And my point was simply, this is what we have to look at. We can't just look at and say, hey, great game, 400 yards, 4 touchdowns, 70% completions. To me, it was, did he make the plays he was supposed to make? And in that game, he didn't make the plays down the stretch that, and again, it was assessing what I know Justin Herbert can do. I wasn't just saying, well, you got to make this crazy throw. No, this is a throw that you make easily, and you passed on that decision, and you passed on that throw, and you missed that throw, and it was the difference in winning and losing a football game. So to me, all of that goes into a great game. It's not just the overall numbers when it's done. It's when and how and do you make the plays, and especially the game-winning plays that you have to make to win the football game.
That makes a lot of sense. I really appreciate that anecdote. That was really cool. Speaking of, a quarterback individually, when you're assessing them, you mentioned timing, footwork, some other things, but is there really something that you see over and over again that shows a quarterback doesn't really fully understand the position yet?
Yeah, I mean, I think always. I think eyes are always the key to I always say eyes are the key to the quarterback's soul. That he is going to tell you what he's doing with his eyes. So if I see a guy's head moving quickly, he doesn't know what he's looking at, right? Because you never do this. Like, you can't see anything when you're doing that. So I want to see a guy definitively, feet and eyes set, head going some direction, head moving. Like, that tells me more than anything else if a quarterback knows what he's doing. If his eyes are in the right spot, for the play and the way that it's played out. If his eyes are slow and his body is connected to his eyes, that gives me a really good indication. And again, you can always fool somebody. Like, you can always, look to the left and I don't know exactly what he's seeing, but I can tell you without a doubt, if a guy's head is moving all over the place, that he doesn't know what he's doing, because you can't see anything. And we would never do that. Like, what am I looking at if I'm like, it doesn't make sense. And so that's kind of the first thing that I would say helps me. The next thing I would say is pressure. Pressure to me, I think, is a delineating factor between really good quarterbacks and everybody else. Is, do you understand pressure? Do you know what you're looking for? Are you surprised by pressure? When the pressure comes, do you have an answer in your mind ahead of time? Doesn't mean you always make the right decision, but I recognize it. I don't panic. I'm not just trying to go, oh gosh, here comes pressure, let me try to run around it and create, like, the guys that are really good see it, don't panic, have an answer, know what they're going to do, and solve the problem most of the time. And so pressure is another one that I don't think you're ever, and again, doesn't mean you can't play great, doesn't mean you can't have great stats, but I don't think you're ever a great quarterback if you don't know how to handle pressure, right? If you don't know what you're doing, if you can't make different kinds of throws or know where your quick hot answer or pressure answer is in a situation, that's another tell to me that someone has a ways to go to truly understand the position.
Sure. And with that pressure point in particular, how do you distinguish between a quarterback just doesn't know how to handle pressure versus the scheme doesn't give them a good answer?
I mean, I look at the plays on the guys on the outside, and one thing can be our receivers peaking. So we didn't always like adjust routes. So for me, what I call a hot route is when a team's bringing pressure. So we have somebody that's unblocked, and we've got built-in routes to throw hot to. So it could be something going to the flat, swing route, or even a vertical route where the guy's not going to change his route, but all of a sudden the pressure comes and he just turns and peeks at the quarterback. So, hey, this guy's coming. Let's hit that void and attack it. And so, I look at those things when I'm watching a scheme and I see pressure come and I go, okay, is there a quick throw? Is there an answer? Is somebody peeking? And this is a problem all around the league, or is the scheme not giving them any kind of an answer? And so, and I think, that part falls, it's twofold, is that there's a lot of teams that just say, okay, we're just going to live in the world because, when I was playing, let's just say in a 16-game schedule, maybe I threw hot 10, 15 times in a season, maybe sometimes more, but, and I played in much more of a hot, offense where we were getting guys out and we were playing to the hots, where some teams don't do that. So it's not like it happens a whole bunch. And so I think a lot of schemes are like 15 times, who cares? Like, let's not spend all our time, building all this in and teaching our quarterback and working on all that if it's only going to happen 15 times in a year, or whatever that is. So I think there are a lot of teams that take that approach. I think there's other teams that the quarterback knows the pressure's there, but they don't have an answer. And so they were just hoping they weren't getting pressure on this play because there's no answer. And then there are some situations where there's neither. Quarterback has no clue and the scheme has no answer for the quarterback. And again, talk about leading to bad decisions. That's what does it. And so it's dumbfounding to me that teams do that, and that it's not more of an emphasis, because I don't think it's that hard. But yeah, I think there's a lot of teams out there that scheme doesn't really help their quarterback much when it comes to answering questions and answering pressure.
You've pointed out most bad interceptions happen when the ball comes out late. What do you think is the best way to eliminate that from the game? Like, without artificially speeding someone up, I think you mentioned earlier making sure they're prepared for whatever the defense could present himself, but are there other mechanisms they could use?
Well, I'm just a believer that timing is about the mind, not the feet. And I think, I think one of the things about it is that, we've gotten into an era where everybody plays in shotgun. And they play in shotgun from the time they start playing quarterback until they get to the NFL. And I don't think there's a couple things. I don't think there is a true way to teach footwork in the shotgun, because there are too many elements to it. Everything that, when we talk about 3, 5, 7-step drops, all of that is under center. So I know when I say hut, the ball is in my hands. So I know the timing starts right then. And so now we have tied route depths to 3, 5, 7-step drops, because we understand the exact timing of it, because it's all based on the snap. Now we get in shotgun, and there's a lot of elements, right? One guy snaps the shotgun quicker than another guy. The shotgun snap all of a sudden is over to my left. And so now I've got to catch it over to my left and then get into my drop. So my 3-step drop just became slower than John's 3-step snap, or 3-step drop, because he got a perfect snap. And so there are too many elements that play into it, where I can't just say, oh, this timing is a 3-step timing. This is a 5-step timing from the shotgun. And so for me, timing is mental, as I said, more than physical. And so even when I was coaching in high school, the first thing that I would always do is I always start my quarterbacks under center. Even if we're not going to play under center much in a game, you're always going to start under center, because I am going to teach you mental timing. I'm going to teach you to understand, I say hut, this is when the ball comes out. I say hut, this is when this throw comes out. And so we develop mental timing. And so without ever having that ability, and to try to figure out, okay, I took you guys and we're going to start playing quarterback. I'm going to put you in shotgun, and I'm going to try to tell you that, okay, this throw is 3-step timing. Okay? That's the only way you know what the timing of that throw is catch and take 3 steps and then throw it, right? You're not taking into consideration any other element, because all you know from the timing is it's 3 steps. I got to get 3 steps and the timing should be there. To me, it's all about mental. So I know if the ball's off to my left, and, I know when that clock started. So I'll catch it, and now I'm not in the 3-step timing anymore. Now I'm quicker with my timing, because I understand when that ball needs to come out, because I've got the clock here instead of down at my feet. And I think that's one of the biggest problems in developing timing and anticipation and being on time with different throws, is there's a lot of quarterbacks that aren't set to be on time. They're not ready to be on time because they don't understand that element of things. And I think it's just compounded because, there's so many guys that have never truly learned that it's mental timing, not physical timing, and be able to correlate that. And then how do you teach that? How do you teach that from the gun? There's no way to really teach it, because I can't bring all the elements in and, watch every snap and go, well, okay, that was a quicker snap. So that's a 3.5-step drop. Oh, that was a slower snap. So that's a 2, it's impossible to do. So we're trying to marry it up with the physical, and we're trying to guess what the physical timing is going to be. But then you add in other elements, and you've got guys late time and time and time again. Whereas I'm a guy that says, I'd rather you be ready earlier than later. So if you got a quick set, that's fine with me. Just understand the timing and then be ready when it's time to throw. But I think that is the the biggest culprit when it comes to lack of timing is, truly understanding how to connect the mental timing to the physical stuff that you're doing.
That's awesome answer. Thank you. Definitely think the receivers definitely also have to be taught, anticipation and timing as well. I remember when I was at Penn State, there was a big emphasis by Coach Jared Parker about once you have a line, you got to stay on that line so the quarterback knows what to expect. Would you say it's also just as important from a timing perspective for the receiver?
Well, yeah. I mean, I can't be on time unless you're on time.
Sure.
Right. And so, meaning if you're supposed to run at 12 yards and if you run at 10 or if you run at 14, that messes up everything. Another thing for me, like when I played, I never wanted my receivers to break down when they were, on some kind of runaway route. So let's just say an in route. I didn't want my receivers to go up to 14 yards and then break down and then break inside, because now I can't anticipate that because I don't know what your breakdown is. For every guy, that breakdown is going to be a little bit different. So now if we're trying to develop timing, we just threw all the timing off, because the only thing that matters to me now is once you come out of that break, now I have to develop my timing off of that. So we always speed cut everything. So it was like, you're going to go and you're just going to run through it. So now I know you're staying on the run. And so now I can develop that timing because you're staying on the run. There is no hesitation. Now I can mesh that with my mind and with the whole and all of that stuff. And I can develop timing. So yes, I think all of those different elements, are so important, is the consistency of how guys do things, the depth that they get to, not breaking down, making sure that, you're coming out of your break quick. Somebody running a curl route, if they take 4 steps to get out of a curl route versus another guy that takes 2 steps to get out of a curl route, all of that stuff's going to mess with me. I'm throwing it on 2 steps and now it hits you in the back of the head, because you're a little bit slower than another guy. So yes, I think timing is obviously very much connected to quarterbacks and receivers being on the same page.
Sure. And shifting you in a little bit of a different direction, you've been critical of offenses that don't create space for quarterbacks, that rely on the quarterback to make a really tight window throws. Why do you think some offenses still favor this kind of structure?
Well, I think, what offenses are starting to favor now is what we call pure progression offenses. And so what that is, no matter what the defense does, your progression is going to stay the same every play. So your X is going to be 1, your F is going to be 2, your Y is going to be 3, your Z is going to be 4. It doesn't matter what the defense does. That's how you're going to read it. And those are the guys you're going to look at in that particular order. And so when you do that, oftentimes what you see in those types of offenses are they're simply trying to space out the field. And so, let's put guys in different space in hope that we can, the defense can expand and we can find that hole in the defense. And when you do that, what it does for quarterbacks is it never really, and again, not that some pure progression plays don't do this, but in essence, it's not about putting a player in conflict. It's about a quarterback finding a receiver in space. And so there are so many different elements to what am I looking at? What determines enough space to throw it? Is this throw always going to be before the mic or can it be after the mic? So am I there on time? And when should I get there? And when do I have to get off number 1 to get to number 2 and to have the possible? And so all of this stuff happens. And so because we're not putting a defender in conflict, what happens is as we move to the next receiver, we're just trying to see if we think he's open, if we can fit the ball in there. And so now we're turning and we're finding and we're trying to jam it in there because there is no structure to, if that defender's there making this a tight throw, then I should be throwing it to the other guy because that's who we're taking advantage of with this movement. That's not the way a lot of offenses work. And the response that I get to this all the time with coaches now is, well, defenses are so complex that we can't read defenses, so we're just going to have to give a player, a straight progression and, and hope one of the guys gets open along the way, thinking if we got this structure and hope that my quarterback gets there on time and all this stuff. And to me, I just shake my head like to me, it's the worst thing you can possibly do. It's just say, hey, quarterback, go back and find the open guy when he's open. Like, make sure you're there when he's open and find him. And then the next thing that they do is, it's 1, 2, 3, and then they add 4 or 5 in the progression. The number of times that an NFL quarterback gets to number 4 or 5 is slim to none. So why not put 4 and 5 on their own progression, 1 and 2 over here? So if I've got to look, I can come back and bang, bang, balls out. And then if I want to go over here, I go 1, 2, 3, and I live in that world because I'm not getting past that very much anyways. But again, to me, it becomes, and again, there's some great coaches out there that are really smart and do some great things. But to me, it becomes a fail-safe for coaches to not have to design great plays, not have to teach and get their quarterbacks to play the game at an extremely high level from the post-snap, seeing defenses, processing information. And so now we can just plug and play a guy. We can call a play against any coverage, doesn't really matter, and we can just throw it out there. And then we can coach after the snap. And we can say, well, look, you should have got to this guy. He was open. Okay, coach, what told me to get to that guy? Well, nothing. We just don't think this guy's really that open. Well, okay. But, and so that's what the game becomes. And I mean, and it drives me crazy. And so that to me is what happens is you have quarterbacks that are jamming throws in because they're simply trying to figure out, can I make that throw? Will my guy win on the route? Is he open enough? As opposed to going, hey, if this guy's taking this throw away, then our play should be one that it gives me an advantage somewhere else. So I just need to read that defender. Oh, he's sitting there. Boom. I'll go back to this guy. He's in conflict. And now we're playing the game and we're putting the defense in a bind instead of just trying to hope that our play beats the defensive structure that we see.
And it flies in the face of anticipation and timing. And these kids, if they're brought up with pure progression reads, they're never honing that skill set. And then they don't develop into what they could be.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many elements that are hard, because again, the game's faster at the at the next level. So, you don't get as much time. Guys are more disciplined. And so, just where we think, oh, look, and I think a great example is let's just go from college to the NFL and just the hashes in general. So with the hashes being wider, in college, if I'm on the backside hash, I've got a whole bunch of space out to the field. So a concept that in college may be a really good concept because it's like now I'm making the outside linebacker to the field have to cover 25 yards of space. So this particular concept is going to create more space, which is what the pure progression is about. Grass, space. Okay. Now what you're seeing is, oh, that play works in college. Let's take it and put it in the pros. Now the hashes are closer together. Now these players are better. Now they don't have to cover near as much ground. And so now that great spacing that you had simply because of hashes, you don't have anymore. And so now you're not putting that guy in conflict and you're slowing it all down because you're allowing guys to play that space. And so it's harder and harder to be successful at the next level against really good defenses that are really disciplined in zone coverage, right? A team's disciplined in zone coverage and you're trying to run a lot of pure progression. It's really hard because you're running a bunch of guys to different zones where there are defenders. And you're hoping a defender screws up or overruns something or takes a bad angle or jumps something underneath them instead of just playing true football, train, their zones. And so, and again, we can go even further that if you've got a progression aspect to it, and let's say I come out and no 1 and 2 aren't going to be open. Like I know based on the structure of the defense, 1 and 2 are not going to be open. Oh, but we built in 3's route to be the same timing it would be if I did read 1 and then 2 and then get to 3. So I can't even speed up my process. Because if I speed up my process, my third receiver is not ready to get the ball anyways. He's not where we want him to be. So now I can't even play the game faster. I've got to play it on the speed of the play in a lot of situations. And now I'm subject to everything else that's going on. Even though I knew this wasn't going to be open from the get-go, I'd rather go somewhere else. Oh, this isn't going to be open? Well, this should be open over here. Let me go read it and play it, and let's go. And so there are so many elements to it that I am not a fan of. And, I'm always asking, I'm trying to get clarification. Tell me why. Tell me why this works. Tell me why this is easier for a quarterback. And I don't really get very many good answers other than what I told you, is we want to plug and play a guy. So, we can put anybody in there and they can play. And then the other thing is defenses are so complex. And I disagree with that. I watch film every week and I'm like, oh, it's the same basic coverage as we always see. Yeah, some teams will doctor it up a little bit here and there. Third down is harder because there's a lot more versatility with pressure pack. Yes, okay. But normal down to down, it's the same coverages that we've always seen. There's the same zones that any defense has to cover, right? You got 7 guys. You still have to cover all 10 zones. Like, there's only so many ways to do it. And so, yeah, it's an area of frustration for me because I think a lot of quarterbacks are put in really tough situations because they're asked to play a play that doesn't really have a connected piece throughout. And so, it's just, I hope you get there at the right time. This is when it should be open. This is what we're expecting, but that's not how life works, right? And so it's really, really hard. And so, again, I could talk about this all day, and I'll just talk about my son just because easier than, pointing out different, quarterbacks, NFL quarterbacks or whatever. But so my son was raised in my world, which is what I call defender read. So it was always about putting a guy in conflict, finding that guy in conflict, getting your eyes on him, reading him, getting the ball out, knowing we're going to have somebody in conflict. And as he's gone to college, he's played in some systems that have had a number of pure progression type plays. And because he understands timing and because he understands structures of defenses, what happens to him, and it happens all over the league, it happens everywhere, is that you'll see him miss like an easy read with his one or two read. And what happens is he's so worried about being late to number 3 because he knows number 3 has nothing to do with 1 and 2. But I know that I might have to hit this before the mic. It might come after, but it might come before. So I got to get there. So they speed through these easy reads that they should be making because they're so worried about the timing and getting back. And so they're on time to this later portion of the pure progression because he knows it's not connected, right? If I knew if 1 and 2 were covered, 3 is going to be open, then I don't have to rush through it because now I know the timing of it and I've layered it so it works for the quarterback. But I see him do it all the time. And he beats himself up, but I can just tell. It's a cursory glance because he's always thinking, don't be late to 3, don't be late to 3, don't be late to 3. And now we're missing stuff that we should be hitting. Or it's the opposite. Caleb Williams, I thought they ran a lot of pure progression stuff last year. And what happened with Caleb was the exact opposite. Was I saw him hang on 1 longer than he should have because I think he's trying to figure out, is it open? Should I be throwing it? And so he's holding on it, hesitating because he's not really sure what open is because it's not really based on anything other than, do you think it's open? Sam thought it was open. Eric, you didn't think it was open. I wasn't sure. And so now I'm holding on it. Now by the time I get to 3, I'm late because I didn't really know what was going to tell me if 1 was open or not. And I just got caught like, nah, I'm not really sure. And, instead of going, hey, read that defender. Oh, shoot, that defender runs that right now. I'm off of that. I'm on to the next one because the defender told me it's covered. And so, again, those are just a number of things. I've got all kinds of issues with it. But I'm trying to challenge myself and trying to hear other people's, reasons why and tell me why it's better and how it helps the quarterback and how you connect it. I just haven't heard it yet or anything that makes enough sense to me that it's easier. If I put that defender in conflict and my quarterback can come out and read that defender, and he runs to the flat, I can throw the curl behind him. He stays and doesn't run, I can throw the flat. Like, that to me is easy, right? I don't have to worry about 11 guys. I'm worried about one guy. That's my conflict guy, okay? This is my conflict guy. You know, like, that to me makes sense. That allows me to play faster. That allows me to play with anticipation and timing and all of those elements that become a problem, right? Again, I'm going to keep going on this, so you guys can just stop me because I talk a lot. You know, another thing you'll see with pure progression is sometimes the timing of number 2 is the same timing for number 3 or number 4. So how do I feasibly tell my quarterback to read 1 and then 2 and then beat a 3 on time when 2 and 3's timing is exactly the same? How can it be done? Like, I'm asking the quarterback to do something that he can't do. Like, it's not possible. So why am I doing that? Make 3 deeper than 2. Like, do something to allow the quarterback to have the chance to be on time, right? I mean, again, you guys know football. I know your listeners know football. So a common pure progression concept is what we call a stick concept to one side. So it'll be a flat, a 5-yard stick, and then on the other side, it's something that I call pop. Okay, so it's a flat, a 5-yard stick. It's a 5-yard hook over the ball. It's a 5-yard hook on the other side, and then it's a flat. So in other words, I've got 3 receivers, 2, 3, and 4, that are all running 5-yard routes. And so the timing for each one of those routes is exactly the same. So now, again, back to my analogy with my son. So now he's thinking, okay, you know, if I hang on the stick too long and I get back to this backside hook late, that corner now becomes involved. He's not involved if I get there on time because he's supposed to be playing a deep third, so I don't have to worry about it. So I'm going to rush through that so I can get over here so I can be on time to that. Or vice versa. If I take the right time, boom, boom, okay, get to the middle. Now that guy's had a second when my receiver is stopped, the backer attached to him. Now I get to my front side hook. Now the corner has had 2 seconds to see my guy sitting there waiting for the ball to break on it and possibly break it down. And so my quarterback can't feasibly be on time if he reads it the way you're asking him to the stick, to the pop, and to the hook on the other side, because they all happen at the same time. So what do you want me to do, coach? How am I supposed to read this? How am I supposed to be on time? And that's when it's like, there's no answer they can give you other than, oh, you got to anticipate. Oh, you got to feel this. And that's what happens. Okay, you're going to tell me that. So now it's like, maybe he's covered. Let me go over here. And then he wasn't covered. And it's like, why did you throw it to number 2? And there's really no answer for a quarterback either, because you know the quarterback's going, well, because I was trying to make sure I wasn't late over here. But you're exactly right. He's open. I should have thrown it to him. And so it's just, to me, it's a never-ending cycle because there is no definition to always tell your quarterback, this is how it works. This is the timing. This is the depth. So you can go from 2 to 3 and you can be on time to both of them. Now you have to be on time, right? You can't hang too long on 2, so you're late to 3, but you do have the possibility of going 2 to 3, right? So again, my change up to that, if I'm just doing that, okay, I'm going to have my stick at 5. I'm going to put my pop at 8, and I'm going to put my hook on the other side and make it a curl. And now it's 10 to 12. So now at least my quarterback has a chance to go boom, 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 and be on time when those guys are coming out of the break, right? Feasibly has a chance to be on time. And so it's little things like that, you know, I think I have the luxury of being able to think like a play caller and a play designer, but also think like a quarterback. And to always ask the question, are you asking the quarterback to do something that he can't do? Are you able to give him a definitive answer on why he should have, why should I have, passed on the stick and gone to the front side? Why should that have happened? Not just because this guy's open, because I'm watching film and this guy's open. Tell me what I'm looking at. Tell me what helps me to go, okay, I'm past that and I'm on to this one. And if you can't do that, again, you're putting the quarterback, in a situation to fail. And I think a lot of the pure progression does that. It puts them in a position to fail because there is no definition to how it's done each and every snap. And because of that, these quarterbacks are all over the place. And you can see a quarterback play great 1 week and we think, oh my gosh, this guy's great. And the next week he plays awful. And you're like, how can we have all of this? Well, we can have it because one time coach just happened to call the right plays and number one was open most of the time. And it was just boom, 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 and everything worked out. And I had a great game. And then the next time it didn't work out that way. And I really didn't have much of a chance. And so, and then you can't even really put it on the quarterback because all he was doing was playing pitch and catch one game. And then the next game he had no chance. So again, it's a never ending cycle. And it's it's an area of contention and frustration for me every week. Because I do think, these offenses, in my opinion, and some do a better job, like Ben Johnson, I think does a great job of running a lot of pure progression stuff, but it's built like defender read type stuff. So he's telling his quarterback, this is how you're going to progress every time, but it's based off of putting someone in conflict every time. So I'll give you an example. So like a play action play where they're going to run a guy down the middle. They're going to run the big end. They love to run the big end. And then they're going to run a shallow on the backside. So they're going to tell Jared, when he was in Detroit, you're going to come back, you're going to peek the guy down the middle, and then you're going to read the big end to the shallow, right? And in defender read, I would teach it very similar, but I would say you're going to come back, and if you have the middle open, peek the guy down the middle. Otherwise, you're going to read the defender that has to play the hook area between the in and the shallow. And that guy either has to get depth or he's got to stay short, and that becomes your read. And so you build in a pure progression type play, but it's based on putting a defender in conflict. So even as he comes back to read the big end, oh, I know if this defender's deep and taking it away so he's not open, Jared's going to come right down to the shallow because that's his progression. But I've built it in such a way that I know I'm going to have a defender in conflict on this particular play. So the progression works. It fits together. And so, again, I would call that more of a defender read type play because it's set up that way. But they run it more as a pure progression. So there are offenses out there that do a better job of, the coaches putting guys in conflict, even though they might be telling their quarterback, we're going to read it this way, knowing should get, this guy open, this guy or this guy open based off of, how we built the play.
I'm curious, what are your thoughts on Jaden Daniels' use of virtual reality to speed up his processing? Kind of as you were just talking, I was thinking, oh, maybe this is an antidote to poorly timed concepts. But do you think it contributed to his on-field success? Are you an advocate of that in general?
It's hard for me to say. Like I've put the goggles on a number of times, with different things, and I never really liked it because I never felt like it gave me the same feel, the same depth perception, the same peripheral vision. And again, I don't know what it was, but the ones that I was, and this was years ago, the ones that I felt like it limited my view. I was more like, looking, through kind of blinders. And I didn't like that because it just didn't feel like real football. The perspective, wherever my vision was, it just didn't feel quite the same. Not that it still couldn't have given me, some, the ability to snap the ball and read a safety and some of that stuff. I went into a, virtual reality, like throwing tank thing, where I had a ball and would do it and then have to throw it. And the balls didn't go where I wanted them to go. The defenders, didn't move the way that so nothing that I've seen has been, a direct correlation to playing. And so the ones I was in, I didn't really like because I didn't think it stimulated real life enough. I've heard some great things about this one. I've actually even talked to the people that created this one for Jaden. And, I think the other benefit of that is like when he was at LSU, they put LSU's offense in there. So he was calling the same plays. He was running the same plays. He was having the benefit of that. So I'm sure they've put Washington's offense in this simulator. So he is getting some quality reps to some degree with his offense. So it's not just like, oh, this is kind of like our play. This is our play. This is how we run it, and to be able to place that in there and put defenses. I think there's, there's got to be some benefits to it without a doubt. The other thing that I heard was that Jaden will speed up the speed of the play. So instead of going at 100%, he's going to go at 120%. So now he has to see and react a little bit faster. So yeah, I think there could be some really good elements of that as long as the structure really fits and connects to how you're seeing the game and how you're going through it. Because I've always believed it's one of the hardest things. Like if the way you play quarterback is highly based on your ability to process information. The question becomes, okay, what do I do for the 6 months in the off season where I don't get 11 guys to show up in my backyard and run 11 on 11 or 7 on 7 every day so I can read defenders and make throws? I mean, I can go throw against air. I mean, I can go throw against air right now and outthrow most of the guys in the NFL probably. Like, I could do that, because, like, I know how to throw. Like, these guys know how to throw. Like, it is what it is. Now it's how do I get better at processing? How do I get to see things, speed and react and feel and do? Like, where does that come from in the offseason? Because, especially now in the NFL, they got less and less football time, than ever. So how do you get better at that stuff? And so, something like this virtual reality is at least a means to get some of those mental reps, to have more time there and to work on reaction time and some of those things. So I definitely think there has to be a benefit to it. I haven't seen this one, I haven't put the goggles on to know exactly how realistic it is. But I think it's all, there's so many tools out there. I think you try every tool you possibly can, especially if you're a processor, to continue to hone and grow and get better at the processing, if that's what's going to, be the difference maker for you.
Sure. Thank you for that. That's really interesting to hear. And it's interesting to hear your experiences with the VR. I want to take a second to go back and talk about EJ for a second and your relationship with him. He previously said he called you a coach in his back pocket. How have your experiences, both the highs and the setbacks, shaped the kind of guidance you give him? And how do you balance being a dad versus being that coach in the back pocket?
Yeah, I mean, challenges, to the end of your question, challenges, because, I always want to respect the coaches. One of the first things I do whenever, he's transferred a couple times as he goes to different places is reach out to the coaches and just say, hey, I just want to, I'm here to help. If you're open to ideas, I'll send you ideas. I'd love to talk to you just about EJ at different times because I understand how he processes. He talks to me different ways, but I always want to try to be open with what do you want, right? I don't want to do things that you don't want. I don't want you just to say yes if you're not interested. I don't want to, be telling him something on this side while you're telling him something else. So I want to be able to communicate to you because he is going to talk to me more than he talks to you. And so I always try to be open with them that I want to be an advocate for them. I want to help, I want to help them to maybe adjust things that maybe are more in the vein of how EJ sees things. And I also want to be able to reiterate some of their coaching to EJ. So I want to know what's going on. So but it's not easy. I know it's not easy for, any OC in college to go, okay, he's got, an NFL Hall of Fame quarterback in his back pocket that, knows everything about the game and whatever. And so I know that's tough, but at the end of the day, I think it's nothing but a benefit for EJ from the standpoint of having different perspectives and being able to hear different things. And I think a lot of times I can be a voice of reason for him. So when he is running something that's pure progression and, he throws it to number 1 because he thinks he's open and all of a sudden number 3 comes wide open and the coach says, hey, you need to, wait and throw it to number 3. And he asks the coach, why? And the coach goes, well, because 3's open. And, then he can come to me and he goes, Dad, what do you think? And I'm like, you know what I think. I mean, first of all, you have no idea 3's going to be open. So you can't take that and, and look at that as a huge negative to you because you're doing what he told you to do. You thought 1 was open, so you threw it to 1. I can't argue with that. I can tell you I didn't think 1 was open. He can tell you he didn't think 1 was open. But if you think 1 is open and that's how we're telling you to do it, you got to throw it to number 1 because there's no reason for you to go to number. So I can be a voice of reason on some of those things. I've also played the game. So I can also be hard and critical of him where I can be critical of him and tell him, this is, where you made a mistake, or your feet aren't very good here, or this is why this happened. And I could speak to him from that perspective as well. I think I'm always trying to teach him too, that to me, playing quarterback is about information and is about understanding why. And so, to give him information that maybe he can take back to a coach and say, hey, coach, can we try it this way? Can we try it that way? To talk through some of the, even again, we're going back to pure progression just because it's been a theme, and to talk through some of it to go, hey, if you're going to run pure progression stuff, you have to be willing to X some things off quicker than they may ask you to X it off. Like, this corner sitting outside leverage, and there's no real reason for you to sit and wait on a deep 7 route where you've lost leverage and you don't have a great route runner out there. That's probably not going to win most of the time. Now, it might win one time, and you might have to deal with, why didn't you stay there longer? But for the most part, in practice, this guy's not winning. So exit off and get to number 3 faster so you have a better chance to hit this particular window or whatever. And so it's that ability to be able to talk him through different things, good and bad, talk him off the ledge sometimes. Again, we talked about his interceptions, and, he gets frustrated. He's like, Dad, gosh, 2 more interceptions. And I'm like, you're right. Now let's talk about him. Why did you throw this? Well, because he wasn't supposed to bend it. He was supposed to go down the seam, and you threw it, and the corner overlapped and picked it. Okay, well, you did exactly what you were supposed to do. So you can't let it bother you. I know it was an interception, and we never want to throw interceptions. Okay, and they have another one where they kind of make up this play on the goal line, and he knew it wasn't going to be a good play against the coverage, and he tried to jam it in there anyways and threw a pick 6. And it's like, can't do it. You knew it was a bad play. And yeah, it was a bad play. It didn't have the right, aspects for this coverage. You have to know that and throw it away. Like, we can call it a bad play all we want, but at the end of the day, you got to make the best decision for that bad play. And so it's that give and take of being able to talk through these things and understand the game and know that I've been there. I've been in situations where I had a bad play, right? And I tried to make it work when I knew it wasn't going to work, and I threw an interception. And that's on me. Like, again, I can go and say, hey, coach, we got to change the play. Like, this doesn't help me, but that's at the end of the day, it was me making a bad play worse, right? And then other times it was like, yeah, he was supposed to cut under the safety and he went over the top and I threw it and it was an interception. And I looked like an idiot, and I have 2 interceptions on my record, but I know that one wasn't on me. I would throw that again every time, expecting my guy to do the right thing. And so, I have that perspective from all those different angles to be able to, hold him accountable, but then, kind of take that burden off him at times, going, hey, it's a great throw. It's a great decision. It just happened to go against you. Like, oh, that was a great defensive play. Like, it's okay. Sometimes the defense wins. And so it's all of those different things, and I remind him all the time, I won an MVP throwing 22 interceptions. I said, I won the MVP on every throw I made outside of those 22. But, yeah, I made 22 bad ones. They just happen to get like, it happens, and it's part of the nature. And so it's always, because I played aggressive, and I was going to take chances, and I was going to, put the ball in those tough situations, expecting my guy to make a play. And if he didn't, it was like, so what? We'll go make the next one. And, so it's always balancing all of those different things to help him be the best version of himself, to help him get the best out of, the different offenses that he's been in, to help the coaches to possibly think differently, maybe design things a little bit differently, or maybe even in this situation, design a little bit more around your quarterback, right? You might not always do this, but you've got a quarterback that's really good at processing, that's really good at reading defenders. Like, let's put a little bit more of that in there to play to his strengths, because that's where he's really good. So, it's all of that stuff, which I think it's been really fun because we've grown closer. I think he's grown a lot. I think I've helped different coaches to grow and adjust and think a little bit differently. And I feel like coaches might say something different, but I feel like the relationship between the 3 of us in the different situations has been really, really good. And the communication has been really, really good. And so, it's helped us be the best version of all of ourselves.
That's awesome.
I think you've said you'd rather have a great processor than someone with great arm talent. And I think it's funny because some of the best QBs we've ever seen dropping the ball in the bucket down the field are you, Dan Marino, and Jalen Hurts. I think that's one of his strong suits. But candidly, I don't think Hurts is an elite processor. So if you were tasked with improving Hurts processing, how would you go about that? What's the lowest hanging fruit?
Well, I mean, I think you got to know the player first and foremost. You got to understand what they can process, how quickly, and that to me will affect how you build your offense and what you're going to do. So for me, like, I would want every coordinator to have, the biggest empty package that they've ever had when they coach me. Like, I want 5 guys out, get them moving, make the defense move, make me make a quick decision. Let me process and get the ball out because that's what I'm good at. So let's live in that world of putting the pressure on the defense by making everything go fast. When I played in St. Louis, we're on turf, we were a fast team. We did everything fast because I could see and process fast, and it played right to my strengths. If I have a guy that's not as good a processor, that doesn't process as fast, I'm going to try to slow down, the game. I'm not going to run all the quick stuff. I'm not going to put 5 out where he's got to see all kinds of stuff. I'm going to run more intermediate stuff, some stuff where, it times up better with his ability to kind of see and get to where he needs to go. I'm going to spend a lot of time on forcing the processing part of it. Whether that's, and to me, again, I think we overcomplicate it sometimes in terms of, the one thing that you're always going to hear is quarterback drop back. And one of the first things the coach is always going to say is, what coverage was it? What coverage was it? What coverage was it? What coverage was it? Which, again, we understand coverages give us a basis of what everybody's doing on a particular play. But there are also a lot of plays where I don't really care what 8 guys are doing. I only care what 3 guys are doing. So, to me, there's certain plays to me that I call corner off plays. So all I need to know as a quarterback is the corner off. If the corner's off, then I know right where my read value is, and I know what I'm doing on that play, and I know I can read that side. If the corner rolls, I know I'm off of that. Or vice versa. If I get a roll, I know where it is. Or I've got this particular play. I know where my conflict players are. All I need to do is see this lane right here. Is there 1 guy or is there 2 guys? And so when it comes to processing, that's how I would look at it. I would build concepts that say, okay, on this concept, what do you need to know? You don't need to know if it's cover 6 or cover 4. Now, that can help you if you know all of that. You know what everybody's doing. Great. But what do you need to know? Oh, I need to know if the corner's off. Okay. So now I would work on things like that. Like, okay, we're going to read this play over and over again. What's your key? Corner off. What's your key? Corner off. All right, boom. Go over there. Corner rolls. All right, now I just need to see you move somewhere else. So I would try to simplify the process, the mental processing part of it within my plays to really get that player to understand this play. What do I need to know? I don't need to know what 11 guys are doing. I need to know what. And once I know that to me can help. I always say make the game as fast as possible, or make it as simple as possible, as quickly as possible. That's what I want to do. I want to get them to know this concept, no matter what defense they're running, what are we attacking on this concept? If you know that, you know what you need to look for on that concept, right? It's just one concept. It's not every concept we have in the playbook, so I don't need you to know the structure of everything. I just need to know, is there 1 or 2 guys in that conflict area? Like a great example is a double slant combination, right? Everybody runs it. Double slant, okay? And so what normal people will tell you is, okay, here's what we're going to do. Well, I'll give you a whole concept. So one side is a slant flat, okay? So it's what I call combo. The other side is double slant, okay? And so what most people will tell you is, okay, we're going to go to the slant flat side against cover 3, okay? Because we want the corner off. We're going to isolate the outside linebacker. We're going to go there and cover 3. And what that means is on the other side, there's usually 2 defenders underneath on the other side in cover 3. So we don't want to run double slants because we're coming inside to those 2 defenders. So slant flat against cover 3, and against middle open, okay, cover 2, cover 4, we're going to go to the double slants. Because in that coverage, most of the time you're only going to have one underneath defender on that side. And that's just basic structure of defenses. Now, for me, I would go up and say, all right, here's what I want you to do. We got double slants over on this side. Come up and tell me if there's one defender underneath or two. If there's only one defender underneath to that side, I don't care what the rest of the coverage is. I don't care. Read it over there. You only got one guy, 1 against 2. That's it. That's all you need to know. If they drop a second guy down there, we can't read that side. Go to the other side. And then read that way. Okay. And then work to your check down. If, they happen to, whatever, have it right. They roll to this, whatever. But I can get him to kind of understand the field by going, that's all you need to see. I don't care what the safeties are doing, right? Doesn't matter to me unless one of them drops down. If there's one defender and you drop back and the safety drops down, you got to go to the other side because that becomes our second defender. That's all you need to know, right? They can be in cover 3 and drop 3 guys, right? It's what I call a push cover 3. You can have a push cover 3 where there are 3 underneath defenders to one side of the field and 1 underneath defender to the other side of the field. So if I'm telling you you can only throw double slant against cover 2 or cover 4, now you're in trouble because they pushed an extra backer to the slant flat. But what do you have? Oh, I only have 1 defender to the backside. But it's cover 3. Why do I care if it's cover 3? What does that have anything? It has nothing to do with it. So read that 1 defender and play. And so it's helping the processing from that standpoint because maybe, and again, I don't know where Jalen is. I haven't, but maybe it's hard for him to see the whole structure and see 11 guys. But maybe it isn't hard for him to see 2 guys, right? Maybe it's easy, maybe that stuff's, and again, maybe for certain guys, because I've been around a lot of NFL guys and I put them on a board and they're geniuses. Like they can tell me everything about everything. I put them on the field and I tell them, okay, now you got to do all of that in 4 seconds. Well, they're 6-second guys. They can't do it all in 4 seconds, right? So they're good quarterbacks. They're just not great because they can only do all of that in 6 seconds instead of 4. I need it in 4. So there is some of that that's out there. And it's not that they can't process. It's not that they're not smart. It's just the great ones, it's faster. It comes, they get it, they understand it, they can play, they can connect everything together. And some guys have it, some guys don't. But that's what I would do is I would simplify the processing because, again, even when I played, I might have known what the 11 guys were doing, but I didn't care. I just knew what the guys were doing that I needed to know what they were doing. That's what it's this side of the field. It's, they give me that. I don't even worry about anybody else. And so a coach could tell me, hey, what coverage was it? I don't know, coach, but the corner was off, so I read that side. I don't know. There was only 1 defender over there, so I threw the double slants. They weren't going to cover it because there's only 1 guy there. And so that to me is how you simplify the processing part of it instead of overcomplicating it and expecting guys to see and know know what you need to know on a given play and be able to process that. Now we've got a chance to be successful.
Sure. And it seems like one of the ways that they do try to simplify is not necessarily in the processing part, but maybe to an extent, but more in what concepts they call. There seems to be a lot of vanilla passing concepts. And one of the biggest criticisms of the Eagles offense is the predictability. So do you think it's worth that trade-off to make Hurts comfortable, or just really any offense in general, the really making them comfortable versus predictability, that trade-off?
Predictability is an interesting word because to me, it's more about productivity. You can give me the same 5 simple concepts every week, and if I can execute them every week, and even if they know it's coming, right? Again, another great example, when I played with the Greatest Show on Turf, it didn't matter who we were playing. They knew we were throwing the big end that week. They knew it was coming. They knew it was coming numerous times, and now they had to stop it. But they knew it was coming. There was no secrets. We were going to throw that 5 to 7 times a game, no matter what. And I didn't care. None of us cared, right? And yeah, every once in a while, did a guy squat on it and make an interception? Or sure. But the other 6 times, we hit it for 25 yards and we killed you. And so to me, it's about executing, because I've seen the same thing with the Eagles, and sometimes I get kind of bored with it. And I'm like, that same boring, throw flat over here and it's a seam on the other side. But at the same time, it's like, but at the end of the day, why do we have to overcomplicate it? We've got guys on the outside that can win. We've got a quarterback that understands this structure. We've got a good run game that allows us to have the one-on-one battles on the outside that, that you said it, Jalen throws it really, really well. Why do I have to overcomplicate it? And again, I like it. I've played with Mike Martz. We would have 220 pass plays a week, and I loved it. And I love the challenge, and I love the differences, and I love the nuances and learning it and seeing if I could execute. I loved it. But to me, it's about productivity. And that's what I continue to see with, the Eagles is like, yeah, I'm bored with it. But it's like, but it works. And Jalen sees it and he throws it well and they get their one-on-one matchups. And so, that's, I think, the thing that, I have to fight when I'm watching tape, and again, I think it lends itself sometimes to also wondering how good Jalen is, like as a quarterback, you're like, okay, well, yeah, I mean, I know he can make these throws. I know he can read these reads. It's pretty simple. They're getting stacked boxes because of Saquon. And so it's one-on-one on the outside, but so what? Like, I would love that. If I was playing, it would be like, oh, hey, one-on-one, throw it, complete it, throw it, complete it. Let's have fun. Like, and again, I don't know if it gives us the extent of how good Jalen is because, like, now if you gave him 220 pass plays like we had, right, that ups everybody. Like, oh, my gosh, Kurt's great because look at all the different stuff that he's doing and seeing and throwing. Okay, maybe. But I wouldn't have been mad if we called curl flat 20 times a game if I hit the curl flat all 20 times. Like, it'd be like, fine, whatever. Like, okay, I'll just keep reading it and throwing it. I'll just keep playing. And so I do think that lends itself to us really not being sure how good, from a complete standpoint, Jalen Hurts is. But again, if I'm Jalen, I'm going 2 Super Bowls in 3 years, like what, whatever, Super Bowl champion. Yeah, like, I'm doing what I have to do. I'm playing within the offense. We've got a great team. I'm benefiting from that, but I'm playing good football and I'm winning. And who cares? Because 15 years from now, nobody's going to say, well, but all he did was throw curl flat. No, they're going to say Jalen Hurts, let him do another Super Bowl. And in those moments, he's played great. Like, so it's not going to be that either. Like, he's played great in the Super. Like, so again, I think we always have to fight that because I think my natural inclination is I want to know how good these guys are. I want to know what they see. I want to know what they understand. I want to know what their top level is and how great they can be. But I'm not going to sit here and watch tape and get mad at Jalen for making the right decision, even if the concept is really simple, because I threw curl flat a lot in my life. And it would be one of my favorite concepts if I was put in a playbook. That would be run a lot if I had 5 plays. So I get it. So again, it doesn't bother me as long as you're having success with it. Once it starts to catch up with you and you can't make adjustments and you can't complement it and you can't do other things, that's when I would worry about it. I'm not worried about it right now because they just continue to function very, very well within the system that they're running.
On that note, could you just throw out like 2-3 concepts like that you definitely have heavily in your playbook, like some of your favorites?
Oh, yeah, for sure. One concept, I kind of talked about it when I was talking about Detroit, that I would definitely have is I would have what I call an influence post. So a guy influencing the safety down the middle of the field, a big in on the outside. So those 2 combinations, and then something coming to that hook area. So it could be a 3-by-1 where I'm just simply putting a hook underneath it. Could be a back check into the hook area, or it could be a shallow route coming from the other side. But some way, shape, or form to get a high-low with the big in, and then a guy clearing out that safety. So there couldn't be like a quarter safety holding in there to take away that in. That would be one concept. What a lot of people call sail, play that I call poco, a post corner combination with a flat underneath it. Would definitely be a gimme in my playbook. The curl flat would definitely be in my playbook too, just because I love it. Let's see, F post, which was, a staple for us, which was, you guys have seen it, but for those that are watching at home, what we would do is we would put a big comeback on the backside, and that comeback could convert to a corner route against a cover 2 corner. We would have our back check to the swing on the backside. And then on the front side, we would have what we call an influence shallow. So a shallow that would try to grab the Mike linebacker, and then he would run a shallow back into that comeback and swing. So we had that triangle over there. And then the F post was that number 2 route. So it was kind of like a slot slant, but, push outside and then break back on a quick post back into that side. And so we were really good at running the post. We had a number of guys, Marshall and a number of guys that were really good at that post. But I loved the structure too, because I knew that if I didn't have the post on the front side, that I was always going to have an advantage on the backside. So if I had a one-on-one corner, I'd have a comeback with Torrey Holt. If I got cover 2 back there, I would get a high-low with the corner and the swing against cover 2 on the backside. So it was a play that to me was good against every coverage with that adjustment. And I really just love that play. I love the timing of that play. So those are a few that I would, have as staples in my offense. And again, I could go into, a game and run those heavily over and over and over again and feel very confident that I could have success just about every time out, because I have answers against really all the different coverages that I would be seeing.
And for the audio listeners, we'll put up diagrams of each of the plays just discussed to kind of help you guys visualize this. All right, last one before we get out of here. I sincerely believe you're one of the few people who's played the game at the highest level. You think about the game at a really high level, and you communicate, as you did today, at some of the highest level.
Thank you.
And for those reasons, I think you'd be an unbelievable offensive coordinator in the NFL. So is that something that interests you at all? And if Kevin Patullo gets hired as a head coach, would you ever come to Philly?
It's hard to say that it doesn't interest me, because I believe I have a lot to offer. I believe I have a unique perspective. I believe that I see and understand the game at a unique level. And like you said, I think I can communicate it. I think I can build it. I think I can see different aspects of things. And then I do believe that I've also got a way of being able to simplify some of the most complex things. I think broadcasting has helped me with that, to be able to take complex concepts and simplify them to somebody in 30 seconds so they understand that. So all of that stuff intrigues me, because I love the game, and I want to help coaches and players be the best version of themselves. And I really think I could do that. But always a but here, right? But I don't believe I will ever be a full-time coach. I've given up so much of my life to the game. And right now, this phase is for my wife, and for us to really enjoy our time together in quote unquote retirement, to help my kids kind of chase their dreams. So that's really my focus right now, and I'm still fortunate to be in the game. I do personal training, and I do, call the games. And obviously I do the stuff on NFL Network for the pregame shows and all of that stuff. So I'm fortunate to be able to be around it a lot in a lot of different ways. I'm just not ready to give, my everyday to it right now. So I say all that as my kids get a little bit older. I've got a son who just took an offense coordinator job at a Division II school in Illinois. And so in the back of my mind, there's always, if he becomes a head coach at some point and wants Dad to help come and coach with him, that there may be a way that I can talk my wife into that. But what I've always said is that, I've always been open to being a consultant. Is that I think that would be kind of my dream situation right now. Is, I got all the other stuff that I dabble in, but one of the things that I love is creating offense and creating plays and attacking defenses and complementing and being able to put things together. And so, I'm fortunate that I have a number of coaches that'll call me and we'll go through their offense and we'll break it down. And with my boys playing, I get a chance to, watch some film and send some plays to them in doing it. But I think I could be really valuable to a team or teams in being able to do that, whether it's off season, just coming in and going through their offense and talking it through and giving them a different perspective, or whether it's, taking on a team or two and helping them game plan early in the week in preparation for something. I think that would kind of be my dream scenario right now, instead of doing the 60 hours a week, grinding and doing all that. And there's also the other factor too, that I know all of us as players feel like, well, we played a long time and we're really smart, that if I'm going to coach, I need to be an OC right off the bat. Like I need to be at the highest level. And because again, I mean, most of us aren't going to want to go be a quality control guy or, whatever. And so I understand that. And I probably feel the same way. Like, I'm not interested in going and watching somebody else coach quarterbacks. Like, I'm not interested in sitting in a room and working my way up to become a quarterback coach when I know what I know. And so, and I'm not saying that to be arrogant. I'm just saying that to go, I'm just not willing to, I'm too blessed to coach. I'm too blessed to go through that process because of the other things that I have, that I'm not going to go through that process. And, I mean, whatever that means about me or whatever, I'm just not interested in that. I'm not interested in, we were interviewing Robert Saleh, and we were interviewing him, and, he was telling us how he was a quality control guy for 9 years in the league. And, so you hear things like that and you're just like, no chance. Like, not even considering that. Like, that's not even, in my thought process, that I'm not doing, and again, it's just because of the situation that I'm in now that I'm just not willing to do that and go through that process. And so I think the perfect scenario, as I said, would be to be a consultant. And again, I try to make myself available to every quarterback and every coach that's out there saying, hey, if I can ever help, if you ever want perspective, if you ever got a thought on a play, if you ever, have something on film that you want to go over and talk, whatever. And so I try to do that as much as I can anyways. But I think that would be kind of where my wheelhouse is at this stage of my life and of my career, more than get into coaching.
All right. Well, Sirianni's got to get you on the horn here sometime soon. So we really appreciate you coming by. I mean, I learned so much, and I'm going to rewatch this many times just to really absorb everything. So sincere appreciation to you. One thing I learned about going through the Crunch Time serial is the proceeds for this went to Camp Barnabas, which is a disabled children's charity.
Yep.
Remind me where that is?
It's in Missouri, so it's in kind of a small little area, like Joplin, Missouri. So small little area, not too far from St. Louis, but it's how we got connected. If you guys and those listening, I have a son. My oldest son suffered a traumatic brain injury when he was 4 months old, and so it's dealt with different struggles in that regard. And so when we were in St. Louis, we got connected with Camp Barnabas. It's just a normal summer camp, but geared around those with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And so my son went, and his siblings were able to go, and it was just an incredible place, an incredible experience for us. And so we got connected with them, and that was one of our big charities early on. And amazingly enough, they're still rolling along, and they're still doing their thing. We do a Disney trip every year with kids from Make-A-Wish, and so we just had a recent reunion. We've been doing it for 24 years, but had a recent reunion because we've got a couple of the people that went on the trip with us that go to Camp Barnabas every single year. And so we were just talking to them, and I'm like, man, I haven't heard much about it recently. And they're like, nope, still going, and it's expanded, and it's impacting families like ours with young men and women with intellectual and developmental disabilities. So just an incredible work that they do, and really impact our family in a big way.
I was shocked when I saw that it was still around. So we're going to put a link to Camp Barnabas in the description here. So if anyone wants to contribute, that would be greatly appreciated. And I'll definitely match whatever you guys do.
Awesome. Well, and if you don't mind, if you want to put a link too, because if you have anybody that's kind of in that world, that intellectual developmental disabilities world, we've also started another charity called Treasure House, which is a community living facility for young adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities. So it's that next phase for them to have independence, but be able to live in a community environment. Really incredible place. And so if there's anybody listening that is, knows somebody or has someone in their family, that has IDD in any way, shape, or form, just something to get on, check out. It may be a part of their future in some way.
Absolutely. We'll add that as well. So that's all we got today. Very enlightening conversation. I hope we asked some good questions. But
had a good time. Good time.
Thanks for your time.
Yeah, thank you so much.
You bet, guys.